question is, if we're going to talk about integrity and hypocrisy, how about all of our hypocrisy, right? How about the fact that all of us are completely dependent on fossil fuels for the things that we live and enjoy, right? You could not have said it better myself. I mean, one of the things that I've been working on actually as a course of research and teaching right now is about how do we have authentic conversations with people about sustainability issues. And when I say authentic, what I mean is how do we be true to our inner conflicts and tensions and ambiguities around this, right? The fact that we all want to live comfortably and all enjoy the privileges that fossil fuels give us, and we're totally worried about future generations, right? How do we deal with the fact that, you know, we want to stand out and be sort of self-righteous for being kind of environmental advocates, and yet that totally cuts us off from being able to have constructive, useful conversations with people who have different beliefs from ours. I think that question of authenticity and integrity is fundamental to any effort to try to build a broader conversation and to try to build a movement around any of these issues. And I think it completely has to start with that place. The other big one is the science is certain, right? It's done. There's no uncertainty about climate change. That's also complete BS. There's uncertainty in all science. There's uncertainty in there's a confidence interval on every finding, and to say that there's not and to treat it like a religious belief prompts exactly the same kind of religious belief on the other side of the denier aisle. And to be authentic about, wow, I'm grappling with this uncertainty, I'm grappling with my own, you know, everyday use of fossil fuels, and yet I'm still taking this action. Because I think that the risks are great enough for us to act. I think coming clean with all of that and being able to just say that to people and use that as a conversation starter is really, really critical. And I also completely agree with what you said about there's no sort of evildoer out there who doesn't want a future for their children, right, or grandchildren. So we have to start having conversations with a much wider array of people and way beyond the sort of choir of advocates for sustainability if we want to make any change. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, a conversation or a movement like this can accomplish if you're willing to take the personal risk, the sort of personal psychological risk of going out and having those kinds of tough conversations.
Yeah, if I could, I'm so happy you raised that straight out of the box. The movement in general has been criticized. One of my recommendations on my list was for you all to have a narrative that explained what Peter Senge raised the last time I spoke at MIT about 4 years ago, which was how much we're part of the problem and the solution at the same time, and really owning that. And who better than MIT to get this right? Jason articulated it really well, to have a narrative that explains the fact that you all are walking the talk in all of its dimensions. So what does that mean? I am seeing styrofoam cups over there on the table. You know, we know the petroleum basis of those. Like, who better than MIT to figure out what is the equivalent of, to reference the civil rights movement that Geoffrey noted, what's the equivalent of the bus boycott, right? So what do you do? Now, they didn't boycott the bus because of diesel fumes. We all know that. But I've thought about this, and one of the reasons that this gets to the seriousness of the movement, and one of the reasons that I have heard from college trustees who, let's face it, they're boomers, okay, so most are over 58, and anyone over 58 has a visceral connection to the protests of the Vietnam War, whether they were involved or not. I mean, I remember my parents deeply involved. My mom one day said, honey, we're going to pick up Jane Fonda at the airport. And I said, who's Jane Fonda? I said, oh, she's an actress. She's coming to Detroit to protest, and your sister's going to nurse her baby. I kid you not. That's probably a TMI, but that's what happened. Okay, that was my life, and my parents digging bomb craters. And we knew a woman who went down to the Civil Rights Act. My dad took care of her dog because he had a veterinary hospital. She never came back. She was the first white woman killed in the Mississippi. Those trustees want to see a real movement, and one of them has told me this directly. It's like, really? This is a movement? Unfortunately, millennials have been cast unfairly in many ways as being clicktivists, not activists. Is it real? It raises the question of, are they really willing to suffer? That's the question that's being asked. I knew we'd get to this point, and thank you for raising it so early. So who better than MIT to develop that narrative that has real action? Now, what does it mean? Does it mean we all unplug for a day? Because you all are pretty plugged in. You're sucking up a lot of energy, this generation. Let's just be honest. We all are, right? Does it mean a no-fly zone? You're so right to raise, you went right to the Achilles heel with all of our carbon footprint on air traffic. It doesn't get talked about. Guess what? We know the numbers, right? So I look forward to the way you are going to tackle this question, because the trustees should ask it. And when Bill McKibben did the Do the Math tour, what frustrated our investors the most was saying, what? Who are these kids are flying from all over the world to go to the Do the Math tour to talk about fossil fuel divestment? I mean, people saw right through that. And I won't go any further. It's such a huge topic. We could spend the whole evening answering that vital question, and I thank you for raising it.
I want to make one major point, but first a minor one to agree. We will not solve this problem by consuming less, because you have to consume zero. We need to bring emissions to zero. We'll solve this problem by changing the way we make energy. And it is completely rational and self-consistent to not eliminate your own consumption, and also to vote in a democracy to impose some even-handed system like prices or regulations that make it illegal to use the atmosphere as a waste dump. Those are not inconsistent, and it's not irrational. But the big one I wanted to say was about demonization. And it sort of links to the Vietnam War movement. It's my biggest concern about this movement, which overall I am thrilled with. And that is to be careful about not painting the fossil fuel industry, and especially the people in it, as the bad guys. So if I think about the biggest mistake that I believe happened in the Vietnam War, one that we still live with, it was relatively wealthy, relatively liberal people in elite places like this shouting at and demonizing young, disenfranchised, poorer people from the middle of the country who were actually fighting the war. And in any way, shouting baby killer and so on. And that had an enormous political impact. I think one of the reasons why America has been in too many wars in my sort of political lifetime is that it's extremely hard in America nowadays to be anti-war and not sound like you're anti the people in the war. And so I live in a town that makes its money entirely by fossil fuels. All my kids' friends are, all my neighbors are mostly in that business. And I am painfully aware that if we do what I want to do, it will be crushing. There will be suicides. People will walk away from their homes, leaving the keys like they did in the early 80s. They will bulldoze that town. That's a town I love. That is the reality of the kind of change we're talking about, and you have to be honest about it. And the people working in those industries, my friends in Calgary, who I go mountain climbing with and stuff, they are no less moral or good people than you guys at MIT. So it's really important to be clear-eyed about this. This is a business which powers the world, which for some parts of the world we want more of, for the poorest billion, and it is not a business that's populated by bad guys. But it's still true that I don't think it's a business that I want to transform by shareholder activism. It's a business I want to end. But you got to be clear about whether you're talking about the businesses or the people. And I think if this business ends up demonizing the people, it has real risks of running into a political quicksand. You do not want to have a bunch of smart folks at MIT looking like they're pissing on poor coal miners in Virginia. That will get you nowhere.
One quick solution on a bright note that is part of some of the legislative packages, believe it or not, that are being talked about in bipartisan settings. I just want to touch on the coal families in particular. There aren't that many left. We could buy them out. I'm sorry, Geoffrey, were you going to jump in? No, I just wanted to say that there are remedies around solutions where we bought out the tobacco farmers years ago, and I just, so there are ways to actually address this, in particular with some of the coal miners and families who are not treated well by the industry itself.
Yeah, so obviously, like everyone said, I have a list of sort of thoughts for possible questions, and obviously that was number one. I would be the first to say, like we've all said, we are all as a function of this system of the infrastructure and design entirely complicit, right? We all use fossil fuels every day, of course. But I would argue that that is more of a failure of the system than of ourselves. There's a professor at MIT, his name's Tim Gutowski, and recently he and his class, they calculated the carbon footprint of a homeless man, an American homeless man living on the street, surviving at a soup kitchen. His carbon footprint was 8 tons per year. That's more than double the world average, or about double the world's average. When you look at a case like that, it's pretty clear that an infrastructural failure has little to do with personal virtue, as people on the panel have indicated. I was at a Divest Harvard forum, a bit like this, just a few weeks or a few months ago, And Harvard professor Jim Engel, he talked a little about this. And he said, do what you can, do whatever you can. He said, yes, we're all guilty, but don't be the most guilty. My argument would be, at a place like MIT, okay, we're all lying in the gutter. Everyone in the world, we're all lying in the gutter. But what's so wrong with a few of us keeping our eyes up on the stars? Surely us, if anyone in the world, it's up to us to take the leap and to take the risks that the rest of the panel have talked about. And to, come back to what Jason was saying about whether we have a mission here at MIT. I agree, like I've been looking hard. I don't think that there is I don't think we have a constitution against climate change here at MIT. But we do, like I said, have a mission statement. It's mit.edu/mission statement or something. And it talks about the betterment for mankind. It talks about a better world for the nation and for the 21st century. And I think that if there's anyone in the world who's going to take that risk, it has to be MIT first. Going back to the newspaper clipping from the president, he said MIT has this history of taking the high road. But we didn't divest from apartheid-ridden South Africa. 150 other universities around the country did, and we stood still while they took action. And I think it can't be like that this time. So thanks.